In this section, we're covering hazardous attitudes since we are still learning how to work together as a crew, right? As well as being able to make decisions, aeronautical decision making, another critical skill for you. And we got a discussion page here if you want to type in any questions. We also will be taking verbals as well. Start off with hazardous attitudes. We are looking at you working together in a crew environment. There could be situations where your crew members have a hazardous attitude that you have to identify and be able to work with, or help them with the antidote for it. Likewise, you could have a hazardous attitude, and you need to recognize it in yourself and use the antidote on yourself here. It's very interesting. I was flying with a student years ago in the Cirrus, and I gave him a simulated engine fire up at altitude. Right, so you're probably running through your engine fire checklist. First action, mixtures idle cutoff, and then you start turning off the pump and the fuel selector, right, mags, all that fun stuff. So we're up at altitude, and when I said simulated engine fire, you have fire and smoke coming out of your cowling. The student grabs the mixture and pulls the idle cutoff in flight. And as you can expect, the engine just goes blur, right? Starts windmilling. And obviously, one of the most common swear words is then spoken by the student, who then pushes the mixture back up again, and the engine comes back to life. What was that? That was impulsive hazardous attitude being displayed. The student had not thought about what they were doing, had not thought they were just trying to simulate an engine fire, had not thought about, oh, I just do a touch drill and verbalize instead of doing the actual action there, right? Now, why did the student do that? Well, because the day before we were in the simulator, and that's what you do in the simulator, you actually move the controls. So it kind of made sense. But we had a good talk after that.
I thought you were talking, that was the sin.
No, that was the airplane. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Okay, so hazardous attitudes. We have, first of all, anti-authority. Those people that don't like to be told what to do. They don't like ATC telling them what to do, or their instructor, or the company through the flight operations manual, or the FAA through the federal aviation regulations, or the aircraft manufacturer through the pilot operating handbook. They just don't like being told what to do, right? But there are reasons why you need to be told, or you need to do as you're told, so that you don't break the airplane apart, you don't get into an accident, you don't run into another aircraft. There's lots of reasons for you to follow the rules, and that's your antidote. There's reasons why you're being told what to do. Impulsive attitude, gave you that example. You need to think before reacting. We always have a moment in aviation to figure out what we're going to do. Right? There's very few things that are such an immediate reaction that you don't have time to think about it. Even on takeoff, we talk about, if I have a problem, if I have an engine problem, this is what I'm going to do. We kind of pre-brief that takeoff, knowing that there's not a lot of time to talk about it up there. Macho is somebody trying to impress another person. Okay, that's very critical to understanding macho. You're trying to impress somebody. You're trying to be cool with them, right? I always say dead people aren't cool, they're just cold. Just remember that. Right? Invulnerable. Yes, you can get hurt, all right? Hazards out there, they don't care what your pilot experience level is. They don't care what airplane you're flying. Wind shear for a commercial pilot is same risk level as wind shear for a student pilot. Right? So you can get hurt. Right? And just because you've done something 10 times out there doesn't mean the 11th time is going to be successful. That 11th time of doing something unsafe could be the last for you. The last one is resignation. That's kind of giving up. It could be physically giving up. from flying. It could also be mentally giving up and saying, well, what's the use? It's going to happen no matter what I do. So what's the use, right? That's still a resignation attitude. So let's head over to Top Hat, try some questions in there. So I'll read this together and then I'll start the timer for you. As you enter the pattern, you normally lower the flaps. The tower suddenly changes the active runway. Distracted, you forget to use the before landing checklist. At short final, you find yourself dangerously low with a high sink rate. Glancing back, you realize you forgot to extend the flaps. You immediately grab the flap handle and add full flaps. So there you go. What type of hazardous attitude is that displaying? Key word in there, immediately. And impulsive. All right, nice. Yeah, that word immediately, that's a key word for impulsive there. Try another one here. Visibility is just over 3 miles and blowing snow with 1,100-foot ceiling. Earlier, you cleared the airplane of snow, but takeoff has been delayed for 15 minutes. Snow and ice are forming again, and you wonder if you'll be able to take off. You reason that you can do it because other pilots have done so, and nothing happened to them. What type of hazardous attitude is that displaying? Key phrase, nothing happened to them before. I'm just seeing if we can get one more here before time runs out. It's part I love about Top Hat. There's always like one just waiting to get in there. There we go. And vulnerable. Wow. All right. I've got your brains all switched on today. That's wonderful. Nice job. One more here. Final approach at night. You fly into patches of ground fog, which severely limit visibility. Your altitude is 150 feet, and you debate whether you can flare at the correct height and land properly, or whether you should abort the approach. You continue feeling that the decision has already been made. What hazardous attitude is that displaying? All right, almost got everybody in the right one there. Okay. All right, so someone did answer macho. Remember, macho is trying to impress another person, and there's nothing in here about another person mentioned. That's why it's not macho. Feeling that the decision's already been made, that means you can't change the outcome of it. You're mentally giving up or resigning. All right. Aeronautical decision making, ADM, can be a very critical part of your longevity in your career. as a pilot. Make a good decision, live to fly another day. Make a bad decision, there is no other day, right? That's the nature of the business here. So learn to make good decisions now so that you can, when you get it in those bigger aircraft, you don't have to worry about how to make a decision. You have to develop those skills now. Aeronautical decision making has an FAA definition here. This would be wonderful to absolutely know for the upcoming exam, right? We're talking about the systematic approach to the mental process used by all in aviation to consistently choose the best course of action in a given set of circumstances. We'll just chat about this definition a little bit. The first part talks about a systematic approach. That means there's a process to it. We're not just kind of shooting from the hip here, coming up with something on the fly. There's actually a process to go through to make a decision, and a mental process as well. It's not like we get out paper and we start figuring out assigning scores to something, because we could be doing ADM in the airplane. We may not have the time to do that. And it's used by all in aviation. So when we say all, this is schedulers or dispatchers, this is ground crew, this could be cabin crew, in addition to the flight crew. And here's the interesting thing. Let's choose the best course of action. Notice it doesn't say the safest course of action. This is the best course of action. You could be in a dilemma where you have a choice of landing in a swamp or landing in a forest. Both are bad, right? You got an engine failure. You're going one or the other, both bad. ADM helps you choose the best between the two. And obviously the situation would dictate which one would be better than the other. And it's all based upon the circumstance that you are in. So hopefully this definition seems familiar. If you took advantage of the extra credit opportunity for the Safer Skies video, this is what Ralph had defined early on with it. That's a very good video. So if you didn't get a chance to watch Safer Skies video, absolutely go back and watch it. When you're thinking about flying, you're on the ground, and you're trying to make that decision. We call it the go, no-go decision. And there are about 5 different decisions that you can actually make referencing that flight that you want to take. When you think about it, the ultimate decision is go. All the conditions are right. Think about the pilot, the aircraft, the environment, the external factors. Everything says go fly, and you go conduct your flight. But there could be situations with the pilot or with the aircraft or with the environment or with the external pressures that cause you to make a different decision than go. And one of them could be a no-go decision in terms of you just delay your departure. That's technically a no-go decision. I'm not going at this moment. I'm going to delay till later when something's changed. The weather's changed or the runway's changed, or my external pressures have changed, right? Get something fixed on the aircraft, right? So we just delay. We're waiting for something to change there. You could also replan the flight. You may have been in that situation where you're trying to do a cross country, right, to the certain airport, but they're socked in with weather. If you go a different direction, you're going to have VFR and get your flight in. So you just replan to a different location. I always tell my students for the long cross country, you should have 3 of them ready to go. One to the north, one to the southeast, one to the southwest, right? You wake up to that day, you pick who's got the best possibility of getting that flight done. That way you're not screwed, because there's a lot of times students come out, they present their information to the SOF, and the SOF looks, oh, the weather, the wind just went out of your limits up there. You knew that ahead of time, you could just switch out, replan, go somewhere else, right? Another thing you could do is change rules. Some of you are instrument rated now. So when you're flying, you could have been planning that VFR flight. It's like, okay, I'm on the ground. I'll just switch over to an IFR flight. You've replanned. You're still going to the same place, but you made the no-go decision at this moment under VFR. I'll replan and go under IFR. Or you can just make the ultimate no-go decision and just cancel the flight, go home, go back another day. So these are the type of decisions that you're making before you even get into the air. Okay? These are very useful for you. The next set are even more critical, because once you do get into the air, you have an in-flight decision, which is a continue or discontinue decision. I'm going to continue the flight, or I'm going to discontinue the flight. So we got 6 things here that you could decide to do. And these are going to be critical when you are working in your groups in just a little bit. So make sure you got these copied down. Also on your upcoming assignment A2, these are going to be critical as well for you. They're going to be integral to you completing that assignment properly. So we think about in-flight decision. Continue the flight means I'm planning to go to my destination airport without change. I might change rules in flight. You know, maybe my airport is getting some worse weather than anticipated, so I'll switch over to an IFR flight plan, pick up an IFR clearance to make it into my destination. So that's fine. I'm still continuing to my destination. I could decide to land short of the destination. So, you know, as you're flying to your destination airport, you're usually flying over or nearby airports. So I could simply stop at one of those airports along the way. That would be landing short. And maybe I land and wait for something to change, or maybe I land and rent the car and finish the journey that way. I could also make that decision, the discontinue decision, to divert. So I'm no longer going to go to my planned destination. I'm going to go to an airport that's not along my route, but it's off my route, and such that I got to plan a new heading to get there. I got to see how many minutes it's going to, or hours it's going to take to get there, and do I got enough fuel to get there? So that would be what the diversion is all about. I could also make a discontinue decision and just return back to my departure airport. And I'm sure that has happened to some of you in this class, where you took off on a training flight here at Battle Creek. Things were a lot different than what was forecasted, and you just decided to come back. That's fine. You might not be able to return back, you know, if it's a 4-hour flight and you're 3 hours into it, that might not be an option anymore for you. Right? So your situation, your circumstances would dictate whether that's an option. You could also hold and wait for conditions to change. For example, if your destination airport had a situation where the aircraft ahead of you landed with locked brakes, and that was the only runway to land on, you could just hold and wait for them to tug the aircraft off the runway, clear it of any debris so that you could land. The last one is kind of the ultimate off-airport arrival. You're going to land in a field. Okay. Think about this. If you're a VFR only pilot, or you're in a VFR only airplane and you're starting to run out of daylight, or you're starting to run out of fuel, or you're running out of good weather conditions, and you have a viable field below you, farmer field, a viable road, and that's where you do that precautionary landing, or CAPS deployment. You know, it'd be the ultimate off-airport encounter. But yeah, those would be all the discontinue decisions that you can make there. So those will be integral to you working in groups today, as well as on your upcoming assignment. Yeah. Now, if you did get a chance to look at the Safer Skies movie, right, Gina did a wonderful job of going through the 3P risk management model. To me, it makes the most sense on this model here of perceiving hazards, processing those hazards, performing risk management, and evaluating the outcome. And it's kind of set up to be a repeating type of a management model where you're always in the process of trying to perceive hazards. We think about going flying, we're trying to make a decision. One of the first things that you think about when you wake up in the morning is, am I fit? Like, you might run through the I'm safe checklist, right? You're making a decision. I can fly or I can't fly. Some of you might go out to the window, look outside the window, and you looked out today and it's like, yep, it's a no fly day today, right? There's that decision. There might be other mornings you open up the window, like, oh, this looks like a flyable day, right? Or you get the weather report, and the weather report might say, well, it's good now, but later it might not be good. So maybe I get to the airport now and get my flight in. You get out to the airport, all right, and you do your performance calculations, right? And the instructor says, hey, we got someone to take along who wants to observe us together. Well, can we do an extra person on board on this flight with our fuel load, right? You're making that decision right there. Then you get out and do the pre-flight on the airplane. You're making that decision. Is everything working on that airplane for the flight? Then you do the run-up, right? Is the engine working properly? Right? These are all the decisions that you're making, whether it's before your flight, go, no-go decision, or it's in flight, the continue, discontinue decisions. You can be running through the 3P risk management model. Okay. So talking a little bit about this one, breaking it down into perceived hazards, there's the PAVE acronym to help you remember this. Should be real straightforward. If you're thinking personal minimums checklist, you are definitely in the right area. Thinking about the pilot, perceiving hazards with the pilot, I'm safe checklist. Perceiving hazards with the aircraft. Is it mission suitable? Everything working? Any squawks? Does it have performance for the environment? Environment's not just the weather conditions, mind you, it's also the airspace you're flying in. It's the terrain you're flying over, day or night that you're flying in, and external pressures. You've all experienced that. You have a class to get to, or you're coming from a class, and there's your flight slot time. Right? And they're bumped pretty close together, or it's work. I got to get this flight done so I go to work, or God, he called me into work and I got to go skip class, go to work. I hate that excuse, by the way. So I never like anybody skipping class because they got called into work. And then next acronym is CARE, for processing hazards. We look at our acronym here, and the first thing we ask, once we perceive there's a hazard out there, is what's the consequence of that hazard? Today, if you looked out the window, there is a hazard out there. It's called cloud. That's pretty low to the ground. So what's the consequence of going into the cloud? If you're instrument rated, not much of a consequence other than you got to make sure you can fly the aircraft, right? If you're not instrument rated, well, that's a violation of the FARs. That's a consequence, right? So you got to start thinking along that way. More importantly, though, what are the alternatives? What can you do instead? Right? That's why I went over those before flight decisions and in-flight decisions. If you're looking at this and you're thinking, can I make the go, or is it a no-go decision? Is it a delay departure? Is it replan for different rules? Right? This is what we'd be thinking of in this weather here. What are my alternatives at this point? Once we have an idea what the consequences are, what the alternatives are, we can then perform risk management. And yes, we have another acronym called TEAM. Now, mind you, you would only do one of these. You don't do all four of them at the same time. You would do one, right? First consideration, can I transfer the risk of this hazard to some other pilot on board? And you may have been in this situation on your early training flights where there was a strong crosswind. Yeah, something that wasn't in your ability to do, but your instructor said, I'll take the landing. We'll get our flight in, do our maneuvers. I'll land for you. You've just transferred risk to another pilot. You could eliminate the risk altogether. So if this was what you're looking at today for a flight, you could eliminate the risk of IFR entry by not flying. You could do that, okay? Or you could accept the risk. Okay? It's an IFR day. I'm IFR rated. I'm current. The airplane is current. I can accept the risk and go fly in the cloud. Or I can mitigate the risk. Right now, I have the cloud very low, but if I wait 2 hours, the cloud would be higher. So I just mitigated the risk, made it smaller. A very important fourth step here is to evaluate the outcome. Is it working or is a new solution needed? This is how it repeats itself. It cycles. Okay? I perceived there was a hazard. I processed it. I performed my risk management on it, but did it work? Or did I create a new problem in which I have to perceive a new problem, process the hazard for the new problem, perform risk management for that new problem? Again, did that decision work? Three P is not the only risk management model, it's also the decide model. Effectively, it is the same thing. More words, but it's covering the same idea. Both of these are on the knowledge test exam, by the way, so that's why we're going over both models. You can detect that something has happened. You know, this could be as simple as a gauge is not reading correctly, or you see a thunderhead developing along the route. Okay. Estimate the significance of it. And then you choose a desirable outcome, right? What are my alternatives here? What are the things that I have to do to accomplish the alternatives? Do it and evaluate it. Okay. Here we go. So you have questions. All right, one written question for hazardous attitudes, which phrase, quote, it can happen to me, does that fall under? Or it can't happen to me. That's invulnerability there.